very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Rick Fedrizzi, for your fantastic leadership. I'm proud to be here. I'm going to have a chance to introduce to you later on to one of the great stars of our time, Sheryl Crow, but I'll come back and do that. But I want to brag on Rick Fedrizzi and the U.S. Green Building Council and all of you for what you are doing. It is absolutely fantastic. And for somebody like me, who has been involved in this effort for so many years, to feel this excitement here and to feel your enthusiasm and your dedication, man, I'm telling you, thank you. Thank you. I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president of the United States of America. I don't think that's funny. Let me just tell you one real quick personal story that illustrates the emotional whiplash of that experience. Rick knows this story. Not long after I left my job in the White House several years back, my wife Tipper and I were driving from our home in Nashville, Tennessee, to a little farm we have 50 miles east, and we were driving ourselves. I know that sounds like a little thing to most of y'all, but I looked in the rear view mirror and all of a sudden it just hit me. There was no motorcade back there. You may have heard of phantom limb pain. This was a rented Ford Taurus, and it was dinner time, so we looked for a place to eat, and we got off the interstate and found a Shoney's restaurant. Low-cost family restaurant. We went in and sat down at the booth, and the waitress came over and made a big commotion over Tipper. Then she took our order and went to the couple in the booth next to us, and she lowered her voice so much I had to really strain to hear what she was saying. And she said, "Yes, that's former Vice President Al Gore and his wife Tipper." And the man said, "He's come down a long way, hasn't he?" Well, the very next day, true story, I flew to Africa, to the nation of Nigeria, to make a speech in the city of Lagos on energy policy. And I began my speech by telling that story that I've just shared with you. It had just happened the day before, and I told it the same way I've told it to you. Shoney's low-cost restaurant chain, Tipper and I driving ourselves, what the man said. They laughed, and I went on and gave my speech and then went back to the airport to fly home. And I fell asleep on the plane until in the middle of the night we landed on the Azores Islands for refueling. And I woke up and they opened the door to the plane and I walked out on the platform there to get some fresh air, and to my surprise a young man was running toward the plane waving a piece of paper and yelling, "Call Washington! Call Washington!" And I thought, here we are in the middle of the night, middle of the Atlantic Ocean. What in the world could be wrong in Washington? And then I remembered it could be a bunch of things. But what it turned out to be was that one of the wire service reporters in Nigeria had already written a story about my speech over there, and it had already been printed all across the United States. I got 100 copies of this story from all over. My staff was very concerned because the story began, former Vice President Al Gore announced in Nigeria yesterday, quote, "My wife Tipper and I have opened a low-cost family restaurant named Shoney's, and we are running it ourselves." Before I could get back to the U.S., the late-night television comedians, which sometimes are not funny, had made such a big deal out of this. One of them had me in a big white chef's hat. My wife was scribbling and yelling, "One more burger with fries." 3 days later, I got a nice long handwritten letter from my friend and former partner Bill Clinton saying, "Congratulations on the new restaurant, Al." We like to celebrate each other's successes in life. I'll tell you, it seems like a long time ago since I was in politics. I'm a recovering politician now. I'm on about step 9. And I was reminded of how long it's been when I was with a business partner in Los Angeles not too long ago, and we had worked through lunch and went back to the airport and we stopped at a little place called Soup and Sandwich. And I went through the line, got a bowl of soup, sat down at a plastic table on a plastic chair, and as I was eating my soup, a woman came walking in front of my table, just staring at me as she walked past, and I didn't think anything about it. Till a few moments later, from the corner of my eye, I saw the same woman come in the opposite direction, just staring at me. So I looked up and said, "How do you do?" And she took one step forward and she said, "You know, if you dyed your hair black, you would look just like Al Gore." Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a time now where we have really got to make some big changes, and you guys are making big changes. And as I said before, I'm really so amazed by what is going on in this Green Building Council all over this country, and I listen to the representatives from Green Building Councils from other countries around the world. You all are really leading this charge on behalf of a sustainable future for our children and our grandchildren. Doesn't that feel good to do well and do good at the same time? I want to thank Rick also, by the way. When we have a 100-year-old home in Nashville, Tennessee, and several years ago we retrofitted, got the first gold LEED standard in the state of Tennessee. That made me feel good. And my office in New York is in the only platinum LEED skyscraper yet there in that city, and the Bank of America building, and they did a great job, the Durst organization and all of the people that have been involved in that. And this movement is growing and building by leaps and bounds all over this country and all over the world. Now, I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the context within which this fantastic movement is taking place. And you know much of this, but I want to underscore it because there are a lot of people out there who have not gotten to the place that you've gotten to now. People who don't understand that this is good for us economically. It's good for our national security. It's good for the environment, and it's good for the responsibility that we owe to those who come after us. In truth, we have a climate crisis. At the same time, we have an economic crisis. At the same time, we have a national security crisis. You know what I'm talking about. The financial crisis is over, and they say technically the recession is over, but unemployment is too high, and we need to create millions of good new jobs. Well, I know where we can get at least 2.5 million good new jobs by building green buildings and retrofitting buildings up to the LEED standards here in the United States. And by building the windmills and the solar panels and the super grids, these new infrastructure investments are the best way to put people to work quickly, put money in their pockets, get the economy moving again. So the economic crisis is linked to the solutions to the climate crisis. What about national security crisis? Well, as mentioned before, here we are on Veterans Day. How many people here are veterans of the Vietnam War? Could I see some hands? Thank you. Welcome home. How about the Korean War? Thank you. Thank you. You guys get forgotten about sometimes unjustly. What about the Persian Gulf War? What about Iraq and Afghanistan? Let me see some hands. God bless you. Thank you for defending our country. Any World War II veterans in this group? Any World War II? I see a few. Thank you very much for being part of that greatest generation. Well, you know, that great generation after World War II actually not only won the war in Europe and the Pacific at the same time, but then they came home and they put their minds and their hearts to work in helping to figure out how to keep world wars from coming out of Europe anymore. And they established the Marshall Plan, and they were far-sighted. General Omar Bradley at the end of that war said, "It's time we steered by the stars and not by the lights of each passing ship." And we had a bipartisan agreement that lasted for decades where we rebuilt Europe and developed the basis for prosperity and unification and peace. And there hadn't been any world wars coming out of Europe anymore.